Remember how I like to teach you that law all touches fingers with each other. It's basically one big tapestry or perhaps a spider web, whatever metaphor you like. It all comes back and touches the rest of the law. And why I bring this up is Donald Trump's administration has apparently, according to reports, just settled a major dispute with a huge national law firm by the name of Paul Weiss, requiring the Paul Weiss law firm to perform something on the order of magnitude of 40. That's $40 million in pro bono and free legal services for various items kind of consistent with the agenda of President Trump. Now, I want to talk about this because historically, based on my research, the Paul Weiss law firm has been always, as far as I can tell, on the side of the pro-gun movement and against the Second Amendment. So perhaps the right answer here is they should start doing some pro-Second Amendment related work. Let's talk about it when we come back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar. I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment in America. Thanks to the 2025 Gundies Awards. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. All right, folks, so this is kind of in my bailiwick. We're talking about a major national law firm out of New York City. This is the world. This is the water I swim in, quite familiar with. And we're talking about the law firm of Paul Weiss. I'm going to give you some information about Paul Weiss, and then we're going to talk a little bit about this deal with Donald Trump, at least according to reports. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the economics that relate to some of this. To begin with, I'm going to give you some information. This is kind of all over the news, but it's also specifically in an article in the Associated Press. I'll put a link to it down below. Basically quoting the chairman of the law firm of Paul Weiss, based in New York City, saying that if they did not cut some sort of a deal with President Trump, it was going to dramatically hurt the firm. It could even destroy the firm, at least according to reports. And I want to, first of all, explain to you what's going on and why it matters. Then we're going to talk about specifically the Second Amendment issues. Now, Paul Weiss, according to public reports, has profits per partner. This is per partner, per equity partner, approximately $7 million a year. That means every equity partner, on average, has profits of $7 million a year. That doesn't necessarily mean they bring it all home. We won't bore you with the details of law firm economics in New York City. But this is a major law firm. Paul Weiss, certainly quite familiar with them. I'm certainly biased in favor of Skadden Arps because that's where he came from. But Paul Weiss obviously is a powerful firm as well. No complaints about them or nothing against them, other than, of course, they're liberals as a general matter. And I prefer someone that's not liberal. But that's just my sort of personal leaning, obviously. So the reason why this comes up is a lot of these major law firms have clients, and here's where the money is. Not all the money, but here's where the money is that with respect to the work that got implicated with the Donald Trump controversy. A lot of these law firms have work with clients who in turn have contracts or relationships with the federal government. Maybe they have disputes. So for example, let's say I'm a large defense contractor with a multi-billion-dollar contract with the federal government to build an airplane or a space station or a missile, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And somehow there's some problem that arises between me, my company that's building the missile or the weapon system or the dam, whatever it is, with the government. There has to be a fight. There's going to be a legal fight. Now, here's the key. For me to get that contract as a defense contractor or as a government contractor, in many instances, I and the people working on the deal had to have, listen carefully, top secret clearance. They had to receive top secret clearance, which means they had to go through this major background check to get TS clearance, top secret clearance, to see classified information so they could work on behalf of the government on that special project, building the rocket, building the missile, building the plane, whatever it was. Okay? Here's the thing. If my company that did that work for the government or is doing that work for the government has a dispute or needs advice about that contract, guess what? I can only legally speak about the information that I get from the government that's top secret, let's say, or classified, with other people that have top secret or classified clearance. So that means that my lawyers, my law firm that represents me in my dealings with the government's top secret contract, whatever it is that I got going on, the lawyers in the law firm, the people working on the deal or on the dispute, they too need top secret clearance. So here's the danger from their point of view, from the economics of the law firms and these consultants, these other people. If President Trump pulls from these law firms their top secret clearance rights, they are no longer given top secret clearances by the executive branch, by the commander-in-chief. And if Donald Trump says to these lawyers, these law firms, these consultants, whoever they are, like an Edward Snowden type, right? Edward Snowden was a defense, as I recall, was a contractor with a company. He was an employee of a company that had these kinds of relationships with the government, and I suspect he had top secret clearance. If Donald Trump as president pulls these TS or these top secret clearances from these professionals, from these lawyers, from these law firms, the economic consequences to them is that they are not able to take on clients who require advisors and lawyers with TS clearance, because the clients cannot tell the lawyers what the lawyers will need to know for the lawyers to adequately represent those businesses, those contractors, those military defense contractors, whatever they are. Do you see? So by Trump pulling these TS, these top secret clearances from these professionals, these law firms, these lawyers, it has the potential for terrible adverse economic effects on these firms, because they will lose a lot of business, and other law firms that have top secret clearances will be able to move in and take that work away from those law firms that have lost their top secret clearances. So I suspect, based on the reporting that I'm seeing here, that's kind of what was at risk with the Paul Weiss firm, because according to this Associated Press article, which I'll put a link to down below, it specifically says that, and this is the quote, this is quoted from the article, quote, "The order, the latest in a series of similar action targeting law firms whose lawyers have performed legal work that Trump disagrees with, threatened the suspension of security clearances for Paul Weiss attorneys, as well as the termination of any federal contracts involving the firm." Okay? So that's what was going on here. There was a discussion as to a guy named Mark Pomerantz, who apparently was involved with the investigation associated with the Manhattan DA's office. Not worth getting into the details of why this is not what this video is about. What this video is about, though, which according to reports, part of the deal is that the Trump White House said that the law firm of Paul Weiss had agreed, and listen carefully, had agreed to dedicate $40 million worth of free legal services to support certain Trump administration agenda items, such as countering anti-Semitism, to conduct an audit of its hiring practices, and to adopt, use, or pursue, or I should say to not adopt, use, or pursue any of these DEI policies, and to take on clients, listen carefully, and to take on clients regardless of political affiliation. Okay, so that's the agreement. So here's what I think might be interesting to do. Wouldn't it be interesting if, first of all, I hope someone in the administration is actually going to monitor this to make sure that Paul Weiss complies with the deal. I would think they are. Don't know, but I certainly would want to make sure that the contract is complied with, the agreement is complied with, and I would track that if I were representing the administration or working for them. But beyond that, let's talk about Paul Weiss's history. Now, from my review and my knowledge, Paul Weiss has a long history of working on behalf of those folks that I would say are counter, to say the least, to the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. The 5 cases that I was able to find that they involved themselves with, these are 5 cases in which the law firm of Paul Weiss submitted amicus briefs, and in every one of these, they were, I would say, against the right to keep and bear arms. So to begin with, in the Soto versus Bushmaster case, this is that lawsuit against Bushmaster and gun companies arising out of the Sandy Hook shootings. The Sandy Hook shooting there, they filed a brief in the Connecticut Supreme Court on behalf of the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence in support of the plaintiffs against the gun industry. That was in 2017. Paul Weiss submitted that brief. Then in, let's see what year this is. I think this is 2018. I can't quite tell. But in NYSRPA versus the City of New York, no, this would be a little bit later. Well, yeah, it could be around 2018, 2019. In NYSRPA versus the City of New York, they filed an amicus brief on behalf of the former commissioner of the NYPD, William Bratton, in support of New York City again, against NYSRPA, against the Second Amendment plaintiffs. Paul Weiss, represented the interest of the government. It's funny because when I used to do pro bono back at places like Skadden Arps and other firms, and even in law school, I seem to always recall representing basically indigent people or poor people or people that needed resources. I don't ever recall representing a major government like New York City or some other organization that had infinite resources. But again, I'm just telling you my experience. Paul Weiss may have a different view because they represented the commissioner of NYPD, William Bratton, in support of New York City. So they didn't represent New York City, but they represented the former commissioner of NYPD in an amicus brief on support of New York City. Then they also, in NYSRPA versus Bruen itself, they had 2 amicus briefs, both in support of New York against NYSRPA. Again, in NYSRPA versus Bruen in 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court win for the Second Amendment. They, again, were on the other side with 2 amicus briefs, one on behalf of the Partnership for New York City and one on behalf of the American Bar Association. So Paul Weiss actually submitted 2 separate briefs against the Second Amendment in NYSRPA versus Bruen. Then, interestingly enough, in the National Rifle Association case versus Voulou, Maria Voulou, remember that case? The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the First Amendment, in favor of the NRA. They submitted a brief on behalf of First Amendment scholars in support of Maria Voulou, who was, I think, she's the finance person, the comptroller of the state of New York against the NRA. So again, they filed a brief against the National Rifle Association. Doesn't sound very Second Amendment oriented to me. And last but not least, the law firm of Paul Weiss was on the brief in the United States versus Rahimi case, representing Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut and 170 other Democratic lawmakers in support of the government. So it seems to me that Paul Weiss has a long history of representing the gun control movement in the United States in various ways, as illustrated by these briefs that they've been submitting. And given the fact that, at least according to reports, the White House has a deal with the law firm that says that the law firm has agreed to dedicate $40 million worth of free legal services in support of various Trump administration efforts, it would seem to me that perhaps someone ought to push Paul Weiss to do some work in favor of the Second Amendment, in favor of the Bill of Rights, in favor of the right to keep and bear arms, because according to reports, they're all supposed to be taking on clients of all political stripes and not just left-wingers, I presume. So anyway, I wanted to connect these dots for you here today. I can't do everything in the Second Amendment movement. Obviously, I simply observe and report, as they say. So for the purpose of this video, I'm simply observing and reporting this connection between the law firm of Paul Weiss, their settlement with Donald Trump and his administration, their apparent agreement that they're going to provide these pro bono services worth about $40 million, connecting it up with their history of what appears to be sort of an anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment agenda. And as to what you guys do with that information, I'll let you take it from there. But I wanted to at least bring this connection to your attention, because these dots don't easily get connected up if you're not familiar with big law in this country. And again, the profits per partner is over $7 million at Paul Weiss for equity partners. And I should mention their summer associates. These are people that are still in law school, according to reports, get paid $3,100 a week. So, this is a very successful law firm, and I know them well. Unfortunately, I think as a general matter, they're on the wrong side of politics, at least on the wrong side of my politics. Nevertheless, that's where we are in today's world. Okay, folks, hope you learned something here today. Hope you enjoyed these connections of the dots. Make sure you follow me on X at For a Box of Iron. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, both on YouTube and Rumble. And I look forward to talking to you again real soon here at the 4 Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.